This week on Nonprofit News Feed, of course, brought to you by Whole Whale. My name is George Weiner, Chief Whaler, and we have Nick Azula, Digital Strategist at Whole Whale. We're also live streaming this to LinkedIn for some reason, because I felt like pressing extra buttons and seeing what happened. So there's that. And that means we can't really make any mistakes. So this is like live edit. We might as well leave everything in. How's it going, Nick? Choose your words carefully.
It's going great, George. I think we've gotten quite good at this. We've been doing it now for 4 years, just about. We are pros. And that's why at the top, we want to tell our listeners why nonprofit traffic is screwed. So, George, we've done a deep dive into this. And I think a lot of nonprofits anecdotally are already seeing this in their data. We're certainly seeing it in our clients. And that's the overall mood of nonprofit traffic through traditional search organic traffic means are stagnating and may go down as AI continues to dominate, right? So we have the advent, the big developments over the past couple of years, of course, are both the AI chat tools themselves, the chat GPT and the Claude type tools, kind of in between tools like Perplexity is AI built into search, but also Google search overviews, which I think we can now say is meaningfully decreasing the percentage of people who go on to read content that is featured in an AI overview when that content is synthesized and delivered to them directly. So some of the data that we're seeing from different sources is HubSpot made quite a splash a couple weeks ago when they published a piece documenting how they lost up to 80% of their traffic around informational content. HubSpot, George, of course, is the organization that coined the phrase content marketing, and they are definitely getting dinged by all these updates. We also have talked about in the past how organizations like Chegg saw traffic declines, and I think Chegg is actually suing Google for kind of monopolizing traffic based on their content. There's a lot of moving pieces here, George, but I think the TLDR for nonprofits is that traffic is steady, if not declining, and now is the time to prepare for what an AI first search experience looks like for your audiences, your volunteers, your donors, your beneficiaries, anyone you communicate with. They now may be using AI, and that has real implications. What are you thinking about this?
It is the overwhelming amount of data coming out here that really brought me to this point. And also, I think about organizations like I was a CTO of a nonprofit. I was obsessed with my Google Analytics. I would be setting targets. I've been setting targets for Whole Whale for website growth year after year. And it did. It grew. And I'll tell you, last year was the first year where we not only didn't grow, but lost traffic, depending on the types, around 30% traffic. And I dare say, I think I know and we know what we are doing. I also know that HubSpot, and you said content marketing, I'm pretty sure it was inbound marketing. I looked it up. They coined the term of creating valuable content that brings traffic to their site. They lost up to 80%. The people, I'll say it again, that invented or coined the term of inbound marketing to bring in attention have lost 80% of the traffic. So I'm trying to level set out there and put out there that look, break even is the new growth. And let's just be clear. If you lose half of your traffic, doing more of what you previously did to regain slivers of it is not going to work. And so ultimately what I want people to start looking at is one, adjusting the expectations and start managing up on that so that you don't end up at the end of the year being like, hey, the board came to us, the exec team came to us and be like, what happened? We had all these grants that were supposed to focus on doubling our traffic. That didn't happen. So the piece is that you can look at are, if you are going to lose half your traffic, you actually still can look at other elements, one of which is your conversion rates, conversion rate optimization. So if you lose half your traffic, but you double your conversion rate, you're still standing right where you wanted to be, right? Because you're getting twice the amount of people coming in. Also, I believe the types of traffic that I am seeing lost are more around informational, soft relevance, adjacent concepts to use. Let's say you're, have some cute cat videos, say you have some cute cat content or top inspirational quotes or things that are like, it's that piece of content. You know it when you see it. That's like semi-relevant, but it gets a lot of attention. Well, that's going away. So ultimately, you're doubling down on what works. The other thing, there's a lot of other strategies in there, but to look at original data that you have. What is your take or ability to synthesize information about your topic cause that AI can't, right? AI will make up stuff, but it needs sources. If you can become that source, take all of that time that you were spending on the 15 blog posts that you were going to put out in the next number of weeks or months, scrap it and say, what is one original piece of research that we could do? Could we survey 100 people, summarize it? Could we look at some of the past decade of data that we have, anonymize it, make it safe, package it, and push it? AI can't do that. Be unique in that way. There's a lot of other tactics that we are looking at, but I wanted to throw oh my gosh, everything's on fire, but it's okay because there's other paths. I just don't want to see good time spent after bad. I think there's a lot of folks that work really hard on valuable content, but the rules literally just changed. The final stat in here that is the one that is alarming, and I agree with because I've seen it individually and at a macro level, is that AI tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity send less than 1% referral traffic to external sites. These are web scraping, searching, summarizing AIs, pull back information. Yes, they cited the source, but people aren't clicking. That's going to matter a lot.
Yeah, George, I think you're absolutely right. Those click-through rates are going down. And I think if you're an organization and you're trying to you're not seeing the 50% drop yet, but you want to ascertain where you're at, I'm going to give you 60 seconds of free consulting here, right? Hook up Google Search Console if it's not already hooked up on your website. Google Search Console is a developer tool that allows you to interact with the Google search engine vis-a-vis your website directly. And you'll be able to see in there the top 10, 15, 20, 50 queries, what people are searching in Google that will take them to your site. Go through them. You'll be able to do this faster than you think, or have an intern do it, right? Go through those queries, see what results are popping up, see which are displaying AI results, see which aren't displaying AI results. And you're going to start to gather trends about the types of queries that are triggering these AI results, right? I think a lot of times you're going to see those informational queries. How many, who, how, what happened, right? Those types of queries are the ones that AI is going to try to answer. And George, to your point, the way to mitigate that is to produce content that will allow Google to be, okay, if they're going to take your content, fine, but they're going to add an according to at the end. What is your organization saying? According to the World Whale Foundation, whaling has decreased XYB%. What is that value add? What is that innovative, interesting, unique thing that your organization can deliver? And that is going to be what allows you to stay competitive in the world of AI search.
I feel like this is not the last time we're going to talk about this. We're going to continue to bring this up and different angles on it. And I try not to just be the chicken little sky is falling, but rather solutions oriented. Not that we're there, but I think getting people prepared, and this is the communication element on your team, on the exec level, and helping your CEO be like, look, this is the new landscape that we're playing in. Move forward, make different promises, set different expectations.
Absolutely. All right, George, I'll take us to our next story. And this is a little self-promotional, but I think it's worth talking about. You have an amazing episode of our podcast where you interviewed Ami Dar, the founder of Idealist. And you talked about nonprofit mergers, why they don't frequently happen. And you particularly talked to him about Idealist.org's recent merger with volunteermatch.org. So, George, in your own words, why is that conversation worth listening to?
These things are rarer than unicorns, right? These are a nonprofit merger, which there's a lot of reasons and just one reason why they happen. I'm not going to give it all away because it's just fantastic to hear it from Amidar, who's been in this game for 30 years. But, the joke in there is it's like a merger a decade. And that's what we get. The Foundation Center and GuideStar candidate to Candid in 2019, Points of Life Foundation Hands-On Network in 2007, and going back to 2001, you've got the Council of Better Business Bureaus and National Charities Information Bureau to the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. At not looking at healthcare stuff because that's a different animal altogether with the 501c3 world, but that ain't a lot. And so it's fascinating to break it down and see what's going on. On top of that, where and how I'm going to be talking about more and more mergers and the elements of that is that, look, we are, I don't know if you looked outside. It's not like the greatest funding environment for nonprofits ever. This may be the time where mergers make sense, where you're able to save the mission of many by merging. And I'm just trying to put it out there in the world because I think it is very positive. But Ami points to a very, very, very important point that you're going to have to listen to the podcast with him to find out.
George, you're such a good marketer.
Let me go.
No, it's a fantastic conversation. I definitely recommend folks check it out. All right, George, our next one is a quick one. This is an update from the Huffington Post. The USAID cuts continue to kind of devastate, particularly civil society abroad, with USAID's partners, implementing partners, right? USAID provided $40 billion a year in humanitarian development and democracy assistance around the world. So the trickle down impacts of that are already being felt. And in this case, they wanted to highlight a US-based nonprofit that has a contract with USAID. They provide life-saving therapeutic food for malnourished children, right? It's kind of like highly digestible and highly nutritious, like peanut butter packets that are used in famine and emergency situations to help kids survive, right? Help them get the nutrients they need. And the cancellation of this contract, which came through, right? So this contract has already been signed. The food has already been manufactured and produced, and the contract was canceled. And the impacts are going to be approximately to 300,000 children in countries including the DRC, South Sudan, Madagascar, and Nigeria. The similar company, Rhode Island-based Adizia, also had its contract restored. So there's some restoration happening via court orders, but the whole thing's a disaster. It's all a mess. Organizations that were already promised money and have already spent money are getting their contracts suspended. It's just a disaster kind of across the board, and it's impacting American nonprofits, of course, American workers, right? The thousands of American USAID workers and civil society across the world. And its devastating effects are still being felt. And as we go to record right now, and if you're watching this live on LinkedIn, you can go to the front page of the New York Times right now and see that the Supreme Court just ruled 5-4 that Donald Trump was not legally allowed to suspend contracts in one particular case. It was over a $2 billion contract. So it looks like they may have to kind of still disperse those funds that they're contractually obligated to fund in that very specific case. But again, USAID's budget, $40 billion. Most of that is done. The Supreme Court, the decision still doesn't save that. So I think just the whole kind of human rights and democracy and governance community and humanitarian community across the world is really reeling. And George, I can say I travel in a lot of these circles. I think the downstream impacts are not being felt yet. There are a lot of major prominent NGOs that kind of under the radar are extremely reliant on USAID funding that are in existential conditions right now, unfortunately. So the impacts of this are going to be immense.
Yeah, it's tough to watch, frankly. And you're right, the secondary and then eventually tertiary have yet to be seen. But ultimately, if you are working with social media driven governance of funding and philanthropy, bad things will happen in the same way that simply like playing with a light switch off and on is one thing in a room with lights, and another if it's a life support system. Simply turning that back on, a few weeks later, you lost the patient. And in the same way that if you're dealing with aid in this way that is being distributed to the most needy at-risk areas, simply turning it off for a week while you figure it out in the courts is devastating.
Yeah, George. No, exactly. Sad and tough time there. But I have a feel-good story for you, George. This one
Huzzah.
comes from the New York Times, and that is that a triplex theater in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, was saved by converting to a nonprofit model after nearly closing in 2023. So, following a community campaign that raised nearly $250,000, the theater transitioned from a traditional commercial business to a nonprofit organization relying on donations, grants, and volunteer labor. They kind of refocused towards community-oriented programming rather than commercial hits. They debut foreign films, festivals, there's free children's programming. And this model, the New York Times writes, has worked for many theaters across the country. Apparently, 250 movie theaters now operate nationally as nonprofits. Of course, challenges remain, right? Of course, streaming has, and then the pandemic kind of has created an upheaval in how entertainment is distributed across the country. And industry experts note that while movie theater attendance has declined 12% since 2019, community-supported nonprofit theaters say that they can succeed if they're valued by local residents who preferred the shared experience. Really cool to see nonprofit models saving a valuable piece of Americana here.
Beyond that, I think it's important for nonprofits that organize on the ground to bring people together. And the purpose that comes from that is hard to quantify, but incredibly valuable. And so this is, great to see these spaces not just go derelict, but rather to serve as these like social health hubs for communities.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to see more of each other. We need to hang out more. We need to be more social. We need to do more volunteering. All of that is healthy for us as a society. And if this is the vehicle, that's fantastic. All right, George, I have a joke for you.
What do we got?
That's correct. What movie did the nonprofit movie theater show to celebrate its switch to a nonprofit model?
I don't know, but I like the sort of Oscars and also good vibe, good feel-good story tie-in here. So what movie did they show?
The Godfunder. He's
Trying to
going to
make him
make
an
you
offer.
a donation. You can't refuse.
Well, you just lost our only listener. Well,
Yep.
We'll get him
All
next
right.
time. I did like that one. I thought that was funny. All right, Nick.
Thanks, George.
Bye.